Hey everyone, and happy Thursday. Hope everybody's doing well. It's incredibly windy outside today if you've been out. So yeah, it's kind of nice to be able to stay in, but my windows are beating because the wind keeps howling. My dog keeps howling herself because of the wind. So, kind of crazy today. But we are 1 week away from Thanksgiving, and I know we're all very excited for Thanksgiving. It's always one of the great holidays that we have. With that being said, I won't be posting a video next week 'cause I know a lot of you will be on vacation, and I know obviously we're off Thursday and Friday because of the holiday. So I won't be posting a video next week, but I will return with my videos the week after that. So kind of for the last real video of November, as I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, November is Native American Heritage Awareness Month. Something that's very very important, especially with Thanksgiving. With the background behind that, thanks of the holiday. So what I wanted to do today is just real briefly, just kind of talk a little bit more about Native American heritage. And our founding fathers, our presidents, and our military leaders here in the U.S. are remembered as heroes of American culture, and rightfully so. But it's often overlooked how Indigenous people contributed to the many of the major events in our nation's history. So, I could spend 20 hours on here talking about all the major Indigenous people who've made an impact on our country. But as I was kind of looking to more about individuals who I remember reading about when I was a kid and who I've kind of followed. So there's really five Native Americans that I wanted to draw your attention to. A couple of these may be familiar to you, a couple of them may not. But there's really just I want to do a real quick summary of five Native Americans who I've read a lot about, who definitely who are definitely people worth reading about, worth knowing about, and knowing that it will help increase our history, our knowledge of this of this month. So the first one is an individual called Tamenund. And little is known about Tamanins and beyond his encounters with like 17th century English settlers. He forged a couple of alliances with William Penn, which is now in modern day Philadelphia. However, the wisdom and generosity showed by him, he was known as the affable one, has endured for generations. With colonists, in the early colonies, celebrating him as the patron saint of America in the years around the Revolutionary War. This legendary chief, he even sparked the formation of numerous social groups in his honor, including the famous Tammany Hall organization that dominated New York City politics for more than 150 years. If you've read about Tammany Hall, it's inspired off of Tamanend. So a Powhatan Indian, individual definitely worth knowing about. The second individual I wanted to mention is Sequoyah. Sequoyah was a silversmith and artist who is also known as Guess. Guess is actually what he was also known as. But he made his greatest contribution to indigenous culture with his formation of the Cherokee syllabary. So he created the Cherokee language. His work, took about 12 years. It produced a collection of 85 symbols to match some of the traditional language. But it caught on at a greater speed after his formal adoption by the Cherokee Nation in 1825, and he created this massive literacy project. And his syllabary actually remains in use today, and his name lives on throughout ancient trees that tower in the Northwest. A very, very important figure. And again, I remember reading a lot about. I actually had a book when I was a little kid about Sequoyah specifically. So, very famous Native American. Third person I want to mention is Sacagawea. Those of us who live in this part of the country were probably well aware of Sacagawea. She was a Shoshone Native American, and she was actually abducted by an enemy tribe and eventually forced to marry a French Canadian trapper. But she is well known when she joined the Lewis and Clark expedition with her own little baby in tow, in April of 1605. And along with serving as a translator for negotiations with the Shoshones, she actually she had a strong knowledge of vegetation, geographical checkpoints, and it actually lasted all the way through her lifetime. So again, I think Sacagawea, for those of us who live in the Illinois, Missouri, kind of area, a very, very important person for us to know. The fourth person I want to mention is Geronimo. I'm sure we've all heard about Geronimo. He was a shaman of the Apache Indians, and he spent much of his life fighting off Mexicans, Americans, and competing tribes in kind of like Arizona and New Mexico, what was modern day Arizona and New Mexico. He was actually known for having, quote, mystical abilities where he could slow time and stop flying bullets. And if you think about it, it took almost 5,000 U.S. troops at the time, which is 1/4 of the standing army, and another 3,000 Mexicans to finally force him into surrender. He was actually the very last Native American leader to surrender to the military formally. You know, you hear people like if they jump out of planes or, you know, jump off an air, you know, diving board, they might say Geronimo, you know, and that's actually a referral to him directly because he was the last Native American to surrender. So when you're jumping out of the plane, it's like that last kind of plunge to earth, if you will. So the two kind of go hand in hand. So that's where the term Geronimo comes from. It's directly related to the Apache warrior. And finally, the fifth and final person I want to mention, a more modern individual, is a lady by the name of Wilma Mankiller, and you may have heard about that. You know, she was the first female chief of the Cherokee Nation, which is the nation's largest Indian tribe, in 1985. She spearheaded an array of health and education initiatives, and she was credited with boosting tribal membership by nearly 200% during her 10 years in charge. She established the Federal Office of Tribal Justice, offered 2 books, and taught at Dartmouth College. And she actually was rewarded with the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1998, and you know, the highest civilian honor that there is. So, again, so Wilma Mankiller, Geronimo, Sacagawea, Sequoia, and Tamanin, just 5 Native Americans who, again, I've personally read a lot about, who I've seen television programs on. I remember hearing about them in school. And again, you know, I could do many, many different sessions on the importance that Native Americans and other indigenous people have had on our country. But again, just wanted to draw your attention to some of the ones that are more well known in American history. So hopefully, as I mentioned earlier this month, you know, if you could take a little bit of time, just, you know, learn a little bit more about Native American culture and history, you know, do a quick Google search, you know, even take 10 minutes just to read a little bit more. Your knowledge base will be really much more increased. And who knows, you know, it'll give you an additional thing to talk about at Thanksgiving. So. Again, speaking of, I hope everybody has a wonderful Thanksgiving next week. Again, I'll return to our talks in 2 weeks with a brand new set of topics. And again, hope everyone's doing well and have a wonderful Thanksgiving, and we'll talk to you soon. See you.